Hey guys, welcome back to Final Sector, and this is the Final Sector podcast, the first edition of our Spotify-driven podcast. This is an predominantly audio-only podcast. We'll be uploading this both on Spotify and on YouTube, but is predominantly consumed for listening. So while you're on the drive or at work and you want to hear all about, our thoughts on what's been happening in F1 in the past, in the future, in the present, this is the podcast to do it. So you got myself, Kyle, and Michael here. Happy to chat about things. We're first going to talk a bit about, as I said, a bit of the past, what's been happening in the past few races. At this point, if you listen to this maybe a bit later on, we've just had the first 3 Grand Prix of the year. We're in a bit of a midweek break at the moment, so I've had some time to sit down and think about things. It's also Easter break here, so
happy
even
Easter
more time off to think about things.
Who celebrates.
Indeed.
If you don't, then happy 4-day weekend. So.
Indeed, yes. Hope everyone's getting some time off to relax and also enjoy F1 if you're a big F1 fan and think back to what's happened so far. So, look, as I said, we were just going to start reflecting a bit on the year so far, I think. I had a few, prompting questions to go over. I guess just at a very high level, though, have you enjoyed F1 so far this year? Has it lived up to the expectations?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was a high standard last year. With the championship battle pretty much right off the bat last year, but it at the very least these changes have shaken up the field at least enough to make it interesting. Ferrari was always one of those that a lot of people were banking on them doing really well, and I think we were both just like, I think they might be a little bit closer, but they're not going to be as strong as everyone seems to think they are. We thought it was just a bit of a pipe dream, but they've come right back through. And that's the thing with rule changes, is every single time you look back to the recent sort of big rule changes, and just about every time, a team jumps from sort of 3rd or 4th and they jump up, or even sometimes lower. So and they somehow jump to the top because they've just had more time to prepare for it. So it just seems like it might have happened again. But even the midfield, I think the Haas coming back through in the Alfa Romeo, sort of them being in the mix in the midfield, it's kind of hard to adjust to it a little bit, because you sort of just expect to see them at the bottom, because they've kind of been there for so long. But I think it's definitely heading in the right direction so far, but it's still kind of early to say. With I'm not even sure how to word this, but I still feel like a lot can change in, say, 10 races. I think Ferrari have shown they're probably going to be a constant. Mercedes, I think, have potential. I think they potentially have a fast car if they can get on top of their issues. I think McLaren could be the same. Red Bull, I think, could be there if their reliability wasn't so bad. I think Alpine have a really fucking fast car this year. And then, if some of the teams, even like the lower teams, find some miracle fix, if they're going to be up there, or if, teams at the top, like your Red Bulls and your Alpines, who have had some reliability problems, if they'll start dropping down at the end of the season because they're just running out of parts and have to take penalties, and I still think it's a little too early to tell, but I kind of like that all 3 races so far have had a little bit of something that made them interesting. So that's about all I've got. Really?
No, that's certainly, yeah. I guess I'll touch on more on the regulations as such in a moment, because I'll go through that separately. The bit that I think is interesting is because we do still expect that things could, not necessarily that they will, but they could change quite drastically again. Because we kind of had those 2 weeks of preseason testing, but due to the nature of how it takes time for teams to digest data and such, and that because we're in a kind of cost cap limit, you can't just kind of make drastic changes on the fly. Yeah. There are a lot of teams that, in previous years would almost seen testing, and then in the 2nd or 3rd race they'd go, oh, we're bringing our first massive kit, from everything that we've learned. But we haven't really seen a lot of that. We've seen some like intermediate, moderate kind of upgrades, but nothing to the scale as we have by race 3 in previous races. And even looking ahead to the races coming up, many teams teams, especially those which you might expect like Mercedes to have big changes, are still coming out and saying we're not ready with our big change yet, right? So you can even say that 7th, 8th, ninth race, maybe even after, our mid-season break, there could suddenly be still these big swings and change-ups and things going on. And I mean, I've even heard murmurs on a few of those as well, which we'll touch on a bit later on. But I guess I wanted to get your impression as well. If there was one, let's say one, I guess, how do I want to word this? If there was one theme that you could say has been your highlight of the season so far, whether it's been a surprise or something that you were hoping for, what's impressed you so far? Is it a specific, a team? Is it a track? Is it a,
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, honestly, just I mean, I touched on it when in my spiel earlier. Probably seeing like your Haas and Alphas up there with genuine pace. Like I said, seeing Williams, I think will sort of get there. But yeah, definitely seeing some of those more backmarker teams really fight to be, well in the midfield and sometimes to the top of the midfield. I think for me has been it's been really, really good to see. It shows that that the regulation changes have had some effect, with how they get a little bit more or they spent a little bit more resources and time in building their car, and they had more dyno time and blah blah blah, all this, all the regulation stuff that comes with it. But I think that's probably the most exciting thing is as much as having Ferrari at the front is very, very cool. We're
not necessarily diehard Ferrari fans here, so if we were, then there'd be a bit of going, oh, it's great. But,
I don't even think it's that. It's more the fact that I can just... I know I said earlier that it could swing either way, but
yes.
It just sort of feels like it's going to be a Ferrari kind of runs away with it at the front. So, when you saw Mercedes do that during the turbo hybrid era, you're just like, oh, okay, they're seconds ahead of the second fastest car. Cool. They're you're 2-3 races in, you're like, all right, cool. It's Mercedes are going to win, so we look further down because that's where the interesting stuff starts happening.
And often there was that theme where even in the later half of the year when teams like Red Bull started to catch up, that was good that we got some fights in the last 5 races, but the championship was sewn up, so that wasn't a consideration as well, right? So even if we have these 3 teams coming together after mid-season break, you could look back, even at Brawn, they were very strong early on before Red Bull and others caught up, but they had such a lead that it didn't matter. But at least there was still that feeling that at least it was a new team doing it, right? Which is always nice, a new driver and everything like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's still hope that it could be... What I was really hoping for at the top is like a 3-way team battle. Like, we haven't seen that. We just haven't seen that for a long, long time. 3 teams at the top battling against each other.
Not really before the turbo hybrid era, really.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
the last time we saw that.
And it's just a little bit disappointing that it's sort of... 2 teams, but it's more like 1.5 teams at the moment. Red Bull, I think, are there-ish. But yeah, they got a lot of problems to sort out themselves. So, and Mercedes, they're just not, they're 1 step behind or a couple of steps behind even. So, but yeah, there's still potential for them to get up. So I think, maybe later it could turn into a 3-way battle, and that could be interesting. But at the moment, seeing even from, Saudi to Australia, how the midfield teams were so almost, it felt drastically different. You see,
yes.
Even we talked about it in the Australian race breakdown, which hasn't come out yet, but it should come out probably, I'm hoping today. Maybe today?
It'll be out before this,
Perfect,
this chat.
Yeah. So yeah, you can listen to our thoughts on that one. But yeah, seeing the swing in the teams, whether it's down to setup or whether it's down to, just the car suiting the track. I mean, I think that's really, really cool to see that it can swing that much in the midfield. So,
and even on factors, I mean, we've always had changes between tracks, and these 3 tracks haven't been too crazily different. Maybe in terms of like the temperature and such, but still not too different. But even if you look at from using a use case of McLaren and how, you compare their first race to their third race and how much the difference. And a lot of that they just put down to say, well, Australia is a lot easier on the brakes. Yeah. And you go, really? But just the brakes being in the change? And they're kind of like, well, no, but that's actually quite significant for us. So even a smaller factor like that just having easier braking zones to have that massive swing is like, obviously there'd be a few little things under the hood and they were obviously quite comfortable with their setup and such, but still they were quite adamant in saying that's one of our main factors here. And there was a colossal swing, up fighting for potentially, a podium spot to when they were toiling around nowhere near the points in the first race.
Yeah,
so,
that's it. I mean, even Norris, I think, came out and said that basically nothing about the McLaren car had changed from those first two races. So he was like, it's just better suited for the Australian circuit. So that's the kind of swing you can see. That McLaren was slowest or second slowest car in Bahrain, and then it's probably the fourth or fifth. I mean, Alpine had some pace, but their strategy was a bit bad. So but they were up there fighting with the Mercedes, and George Russell got a podium. So
exactly.
that's a wild swing in two races, considering more or less nothing changed on the car. So
yes, as we say, there was no massive aero kit development change and nothing like that. Just getting it right. I think that touches on the other theme that I was going to bring up as well, is that what's been great at these regs is it's almost like every team, if it's not just kind of like if you got a poor car, you're kind of stuffed unless, half the field retires and then you get up there, even if you pull a blinded of a strategy right. It seems like any team, if they do just have a good weekend in terms of getting this set up right and then having some good strategy plays, it's like that will almost always get rewarded now. Like even when you look from the perspective in Australia of Alex
Albon,
of Alex Albon, right? It's not like he stayed out there. He did, what was it, 50? It was every race, but every lap, but the last lap on a set of hard tires, right? Yes, there were some safety cars that helped, but he still boxed under green flag conditions. He didn't really actually get super lucky. The team put him on a great strategy, and the car was fast enough that actually on just raw race pace with a nice strategy, he finished on merit in the points. So, and that just shows that, the Williams, which arguably has been one of maybe like the two worst cars you'd say so far, vying for the worst car, still out there on pace with a driver that, it's not like Russell was in that car or even someone like, I don't know, Bottas, for example.
Oh, you're gonna anger the Albon fans. Oh, dear.
No, I should just stop with Russell. Let's just say Russell, right? You know what I mean? You'd say even Russell, right? If Russell was in that Williams who did that, you'd go, that's showing Russell's pedigree. But Albon, he's obviously still, this proves he's still got it, but he's still getting up to speed, right? This is his third race in a team he's never raced before.
True, having a year out,
And he still was quite comfortable. I mean, we saw him out there on those old tyres, and Ocon was behind him, and he was increasing a gap on Ocon, who had fresher tyres, So obviously, but what I love seeing is that any team, if they get the strategy right, can actually reap the rewards of it. And so I love that too.
Maybe except Aston. I mean, they're a bit...
But on credit as well, you'd argue maybe if they got it right, who knows,
Yeah, it's... I don't know.
I guess it doesn't help that from the perspective of them, I guess, looking at their most... I mean, we can look into them a bit if you want. I mean, the last few weekends, I'd argue that it's more just kind of like driver error and such and that. And just, as I say, as a team, they need to be able to have all their gears together and then they get that reward. Well, I feel like there's been so many gears misaligned there, whether it's the drivers, whether it's the setup, whether it's Seb being away with COVID, all those factors, right? I mean, he had to go out in Australia in a car that wasn't even set up right, partly due to his own fault. And then the race, he made his own mistake, so there's still factors there that you'd say... it's not just the fact the car's so slow. I'd say there's so many gears missing there to bring everything together as a team. Like, I mean, even look at Haas and how successful they've been early, and a lot of that was down to good strategy as well and good management from the drivers.
True.
I guess that leads me into what my highlight would kind of be is I didn't really know what to dub it, but I guess this F1 team template in terms of going forward, both from the technical regulations and the cost cap and the general culture of how they want things to be run, how much that seems to be paying off. I mean, we've seen that in Ferrari because they, of course, the whole point of having if you guys aren't aware, they have this new basically, as teams are developing, they use things such as they run simulations on CAD models and they run simulations in the wind tunnel. And if you're finishing worse in the constructors each year, you essentially get more time and you get more time in the wind tunnel and more runs of... I don't know specifically how it works, but you essentially just get more CAD testing and more wind tunnel testing. So you get more time to kind of figure out your car and what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you do really well, then you get less of that. And the idea is not necessarily to punish the big teams, but just to make it a bit easier to catch up. So, as you say, why it's been surprising that we've had these big swings is because previously, if a team is going to move around, you expect them maybe to gain like a place in a year or drop a place in a year. It's very rarely in the past, even 6 or 7 years, we've seen a team really jump all the way up or back down, right? Without a big change, like unless they've changed like engine supplier, etc., etc. That's a different thing, right? But in this case, where usually we say Ferrari kind of committed very early to that, and now they've come out of the gates running, you almost say, well, let's say Mercedes finishes, third or even fourth. Is that then a case where that's then going to give them a lot more breathing room to say, hey, we've got a lot more than we have any other year now we can actually make a bit of a step too. And as well, that's why we're not seeing, a big team like Mercedes in the past. If they were struggling where they are, they could just throw a ton of money at it and probably figure it out within a few races. But now they can't because of the cost impact. They have to, it's not like the small teams which have just got it right are only going to get their 4 races in the sun and then Mercedes are going to blast away with them. It is genuine for a Haas, a McLaren, an Alfa Romeo to be fighting with the Mercedes, and they can be confident that's not going to change for a while because you can't make sudden big moves as you want to. Because of that kind of cost cap. So I guess maybe it's a bit too generic, but I almost think that what I'm loving so far about this year is seeing that actually pay off on the track. And as much as, I'd really been hoping so, because I've been designing these rules for many years, and they can talk the talk and walk the walk and go, yes, this is what we want to do. But then there still might be workarounds. Those fears teams still find ways to kind of go around it.
Or it could go even the opposite way, where the ratio was so significantly different that these lower teams just absolutely jump the previous top teams, and the top teams just drop, and they just they just
yo-yo every year, and you're like, well, what the bloody hell is going on? This is balance of performance,
It seemed like they found a really, really good balance. Obviously, I mean, they were working on these changes for quite a while, so you'd want to hope they did enough research to figure out that this was the way to go. But
indeed,
enough discussion,
and they had an extra year to work on them too. With
Very
COVID
true,
and everything. So you'd hope even more with that they could refine them. And I'm just saying, so far, again, things could change, but so far signs that that's all working well, and most teams seem pretty happy with it overall.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, cool. I guess just on. The other thing I was going to ask you as well is, really quickly, you can either give a few names or if there's one that stands out to you. So far starting this year, maybe because you expect them to do well or they have surprised you, driver or drivers that have caught your eye so far this year?
I mean, the first driver is Charles Leclerc. I have to get
How
him.
could it not be?
He, with a championship winning car, it was always... I mean, I feel like I don't know if I've talked about this with you or if I've talked about it I feel like I've talked about it on a video before, but, last year there was this talk of, Sainz has come into the team and he's matched to Leclerc, and, maybe Sainz will get the championship, or maybe they'll fight, they'll fight together, they'll be really, really close while they're a team, and I was never convinced.
No, and that seems to be the minority opinion too. We were both pretty, I mean, even in our preseason predictions, we were both pretty adamant saying, when he actually steps up to the plate, he's going to do it. But I saw a lot of people, even guys we talk with, were kind of like, really? And kind of like asking us to go, why do you think that? It's like, it seems pretty obvious.
It seems obvious. Yeah, I feel like Sainz, don't get me wrong, he's a fantastic driver. His Australian weekend, I read up more on exactly what happened. It was most of it was not his fault.
There was a bit of a cluster truck going on. You can excuse it somewhat and go, okay, an off weekend here is acceptable.
Yeah, sure. And he is a fantastic driver. We saw him, at McLaren with Norris, who we know is also quite a good driver. So, and he's just been solid all round ever since he's come into F1.
For sure.
But when you have a car that's like a top, it's a championship fighting car, and you put Charles and Carlos next to each other, and you say, who of these two, if you had to pick one, who would win the championship? Every time I'm picking Charles. He just has, he has that raw speed, he has that raw talent, that racecraft, that it's just something about him that, it screams the Max Verstappen, it screams the Lewis Hamilton vibe. He just has that energy of that world champion that someone like, I kind of liken Sainz to again, maybe people will get mad with this, but I sort of liken him to a Perez kind of character, where he's a good driver and he can win races, and he's, he can get on podiums, he can do very, very well, but you put him up against someone like a Max Verstappen, is he really going to surpass him? I don't think that he will. I think that Charles just has his upper limit is higher than Carlos's is. So, and I think
it's a lot easier to justify him being against those champions. You wouldn't suggest, he's potentially got the caliber of a Max or a Lewis, and people go, oh, what do you mean? At this point, kind of like, okay, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and I mean, even in the very first two races with Charles, you saw how he was. How he raced Max at the front, and I'm just like, he's world champion quality, just based on that.
He looks like he should be there. Yeah. He didn't need a few races to go, this is what it's like to race at the top. It's like he'd been practicing for this all his life.
Exactly.
And immediately he was just on it straight away. But so many other drivers might have been there and kind of gone, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw that a bit with Bottas, right? How much experience did he have? And occasionally when he was fighting for a win, there was a few times where you saw he could have gone for a move or defended a bit harder, but he didn't. You almost felt like he just hadn't had enough time to mentally think about being in that moment fighting for the lead when the pressure was really on.
Yep.
Completely the opposite with Leclerc. You see him there and it looks like he's just, all that experience and promise he's told to, Ferrari and Bonoro and that have placed their faith in him. You forget he was only at, Sauber for a year, and then they brought him in, and that was big controversy at the time, given Ferrari normally pick experienced drivers. And yet here we are, he's got his first chance, and my God, is he bloody running away with it.
He's taken it, yeah. So, he was one obvious one, but it was almost sort of expected if they gave him a car that worked, like a car that could fight for a championship. I always saw him, taking that opportunity and being like, okay,
totally
this is my championship to win, and that's what we've seen. So, outside of him, having a little think that the other standout is honestly probably Bottas. I think he's done. I mean, a lot of it comes down. I think he's very much a. He needs to have pressure off, as it seems. He's
one of those midfield superstar drivers. He's in the midfield like he was in Williams. You saw him do some amazing performances. Yeah, and he was fine in the top. You still feel like he just was more suited to that midfield environment, right?
Yeah. And seeing him now, he has that, he's come out and basically said, now that he has a multi-year contract rather than the effectively year-to-year contract he was at Mercedes, he feels a lot more confident, a lot more comfortable in being able to effectively race the way he wants without fear of, I'm not performing enough, or, am I doing enough to get Mercedes enough points, or am I effectively... He went from, am I fighting, I'm not doing enough to fight Lewis Hamilton, to, am I not doing enough to get Mercedes the championship? Am I not supporting Hamilton enough?
Yes.
And, whatever. Then, but yeah, going back to Alpha and having that, multi-year contract. And again, first race, he came out and he's just like, hey, there's a reason why I got the Mercedes seat in the first place. This is why. This is what I can do. So, seeing him, consistently in the top 10 is very, very cool.
Performing, and it really seems like he's loving it too, which is also good, right? Like there are some drivers who might slip back and they kind of like, it's all right. But I feel like I always got that impression from Massa when he dropped back into the Williams fold and they started to fold a bit. He kind of felt like he was making up a bit of the numbers, and they had to scrape him back in when Bottas moved out, and there was a bit of a just let me go, I'm ready to leave. Bit of a vibe there. Kind of a similar vibe I get from Vettel, I think, as well, in contrast, where in the midfield he seems a bit kind of like I kind of, I'm here, but or Bottas, as you say. I think it was interesting. I was listening, I believe it was the BBC breakdown, maybe for the second race of the season. And I think it was Sam Bird was bringing up to say that the difference is when you're in a Mercedes and you're always having to fight for that another contract, or you're at fear because that team needs two really competent drivers every weekend, right? And you have that one-off weekend, and then going to the next weekend, it's just nagging constantly in the back of your head, going, you have to get this next one right. You have to make up for it. And then, but in a team like this, he can have that confidence that, if he has a bad weekend, he can kind of just go, that happened, that's fine, reset, chill out, don't have to worry about it, because he knows the axe isn't coming if he has another bad weekend, right?
Exactly.
He's got a bit more leniency there, and that's obviously doing wonders for him, and he's showing that on track by racing well, putting in performances. The team obviously is doing well. I mean, at this stage, it's too early to look back at our predictions, but let's say the team is doing a lot better than we might have initially spoken about too.
I don't want to think about that right now.
No. And I guess just quickly as well, in the other seat as well, I'd say the driver that's impressed us for expectations is Zhao Guanyu.
Yep.
To his credit, he hasn't been to the level of Bottas, but again, being a driver that I think a lot of people, including us, really wrote off. I mean, I've always liked him, but never to the level where I thought he was going to really succeed.
Yep.
He has had a lot of bad luck with his starts, which seems to be less out of his control and a problem with the car.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at Saudi Arabia...
Bottas had that bad
exactly,
start in
he's had it
as
too.
well, so...
Yeah. And even in Saudi Arabia, there was a bit of faffing around with the team, which seemed a bit odd. But even over that entire race, if you listen to his radio, he was never affected by it. He wasn't like yelling at the team. You know, he was like, that's okay. He just got on, did the job, raced well. And for being a rookie in a team like that, he seems to be doing really well. Bottas has said openly, he loves him. They're getting along really well. Zhao's spending a lot of time in the simulator, a lot of time with Bottas.
Yep.
And for us, which was saying, oh, he's going to be there a year and going to have to find somewhere else. At this point, I'm like, he's doing really well, and it's nice to see as someone who, as I say, I've always liked him a lot and always felt that it was just a bad timing to come in, especially, well, I guess if we're in Australia and you see Piastri there and everyone's going, he should be in there, right? But it's so he's the other driver I was definitely going to mention in that bubble. I was
going to mention him as well. So outside of that, there's nothing I guess super outstanding. Seeing George right on Hamilton's pace, I guess, is kind of cool. It's not super unexpected, but yeah, I think
just nice to see.
Yeah,
right?
I think Hamilton's getting a little bit flustered with not being near the top and having a car that's just not. It just doesn't really work right now. So I think he's getting a bit.
He's
a bit
designed to be at that top, right? Now
Yeah.
it almost feels like he's falling into what Leclerc was last year, where he's kind of just like, I guess I'm just running along and hoping that things improve.
Yeah.
I guess I'll say the other driver, which we probably would have brought up with Bottas, is Magnussen. Of course, we forget that he was pulled in kind of last minute into a team that he's raced with before, but he was still racing in different categories. For the past while, was expecting to for this year as well. And again, given some solid tools, I mean, even in his early years at Haas, another driver which was only on year-to-year contracts, and I remember seeing, I believe it was Ted doing, gosh, I don't remember when it was, but the weekend that he was announced to have a multi-year contract, and I remember him running down the paddock kind of screaming, multi-year, multi-year, and he was so happy and excited. And
I didn't know that. I have to watch that video.
Yeah, I'll have to send you the link for it.
Really
It's stuck in my memory. But again, a guy that's come in, he's got a decent car in his hands with a team that's really, obviously in a lot better state than when he was there last. Even against a pretty tough teammate, you'd say, based on what we know from Mick Schumacher, and yet he seems to really just be similar to Bottas, able to pull it out, have some good battles, take care of the car. It's great to see, both because he's supporting Haas and just to see him back, and the doubts almost immediately eradicated.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean that's probably the standouts, I would say. I mean, you could talk about Alpine. We obviously didn't expect Alpine to be as high up as they did, just as a team.
As a team, as drivers, probably where we expected them to be, I think so. Is the thing. Just giving a brief think about it. I mean, I of course got a shout out to say I think Checo's doing all right. He could be doing a bit worse. He's doing okay.
I think he's doing better. Yeah, a lot better than he did last year. I think if he continues in the way he's going now, I think he's doing enough to earn another year at Red Bull if he stays as he is now. If Max finally gets a car that doesn't die every 3 laps, and he starts to sort of pull away. And he's a
mile off of, say, Sainz, right? Then, all he really has to do is keep up with Sainz, and if he can do that, that's all they need,
Yeah, exactly. So at the moment, he's doing exactly what he needs to. So, but again, the season's long, so we'll see how it develops.
It is.
But yeah, I mean, I wanted...
And again...
no, you go.
Go on.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, finally, we already talked about it, but I think Albon coming in new, and especially against someone like Latifi is doing well as well. We've kind of already touched on that, but I think he's also slightly beating expectations too, which is good to see.
Yeah, very, very good. I wanted to touch on actually the Alpine, specifically Alonso's issues at Australia, because I sort of read up a little bit about what happened, because he was... If you recall, again, we talked about it in our race breakdown, but a little bit more information's come out since then. So I just kind of wanted to mention it because it's wild to think about. Alonso was obviously on a very, very, very strong Q3 lap, which some were touting could have been like P2, but probably would have been like P3, P4 at the absolute
He would have been
worst.
right in that tight mix behind
Yes.
Leclerc. He wasn't
Yeah.
going to get pole with that Leclerc lap,
No.
but he was right up there.
Yeah. So, and before his car decided to stop like downshifting
Yep.
in the final sector, he got stuck in fourth gear and then went off, which was a damn shame because that, again, like we said, that our Alpine is like surprisingly quick this whole year. They've just had a lot of pace.
How many doubts was there on that bloody engine? And then
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, they just, I don't know if they're, I mean, there's this theory that they're like running it super, they're just running it super
conservatively,
strong.
but
No, as in they're running it,
I
like
see what
running
you're
it like
saying.
at 110%. Because I think Alonso's already gone through an engine.
To that credit, he's
so
actually already on his third
he's
engine.
already on his
Yeah,
third one, so
I forgot about that.
they're either getting more out of it because they're just running it way too hard. The theory that people seem to think, and again, I think we might have mentioned it in a video. I forget what we mentioned on and off camera, but you can change the power unit for reliability, but not for performance. So, Alpine might just be going for that all-out performance, and if they find their reliability is completely dog shit, there is some leniency in being able to change the engine parts for reliability. So,
Correct.
So,
There's kind of the two phases where they had to lock part of it in the start of the
Yeah.
year, and then September is the second part. And I think that second part is more to iron out that reliability side.
yeah, for sure. So, we'll see what happens with that. Maybe that's one of the first sort of flirting with the rules a little bit. I think that's a lot of people seem to be thinking that could be, that's Alpine thinking, oh, we'll just run the engine super hard. They'll break super quickly, but it's like, oh, okay, we'll just we'll work around the reliability when we need to get to it. But for now, we'll have that raw pace. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, going back to the Australia incident, apparently the hydraulic issue that Alonso had was caused by a 1.50 pound part. It was an O-ring in the oil seal, which threaded and caused oil to leak, and the failsafe kicked in.
Really?
So a 1.50 pound O-ring killed that potential front row start for Alonso, and he ended up being
It's amazing, isn't it?
last of the finishers in 17th, which goes to show how quickly they can fall. But
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that. That's how easy someone's weekend can be.
0 to 0.
Yeah,
Quick it can
million
happen.
dollar cars, but a £1.50 fucking O-ring can can kill everything, So I just thought that was an interesting little tidbit. But
Yeah. I think the other point I was going to make, I had a note here.
Yeah.
I probably should have brought up when we were talking about Charles, but I think just to demonstrate how good his start has been, is I saw a stat that's saying since 2011, he's been the second most successful driver in terms of getting points out of the first 3 races. And that includes the
really?
entirety, basically, of the Vettel era in the Red Bull and the Mercedes era as well. He
Fucking hell.
scored the second most, I think only behind, I think it was behind Rosberg in one of his good years as well. So that puts it in perspective to say how strong his start is when you think about the past, 10 years of racing plus.
does that mean he's ahead of Hamilton as well?
Yeah, in terms of some of Hamilton's starts as well, yes.
Fucking hell.
Because a lot of the season starts previously when they started, especially when Ferrari was up there, as Vettel generally gave a run for his money, and Mercedes got a little unlucky early on, and when especially in the Bottas
true.
Hamilton
Yep,
era,
yep.
they were quite back and forth. Well,
Yep.
Leclerc here has had 2 wins in a second, right?
Yep.
You really only can get 3 wins to maximize it, and now with the bonus fastest lap point as well, it's probably edged him slightly closer ahead too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
There you go. Wow.
So I guess we'll go a bit into some current news and comments. I mean, we're touching on them a little bit as you say.
Sure.
But I've got a few points here.
Yeah.
I guess a good place to start. We can start here is new races. I mean, I believe we mentioned it previously in a video because it's been news for a little bit now. But with the new race for next year in Vegas as a third race in America,
I actually don't think we've announced this one because this one came out.
I can't recall. Yeah,
I think this one came out actually. The announcement came out after we stopped doing the news videos. So, yeah.
I just don't know if we slid it in somewhere.
Yeah, I don't think so, but maybe we have.
Yeah.
But, yeah, not talked about it at length anyway.
Yeah. as we say, it'll be a third race in America. And the I don't know what to call them. The F1 representatives in charge of figuring out where F1's going to go. Those people.
Yes, that's a long title.
Said that
maybe they should shorten that.
Yes. Yeah, there'll be some acronym or something.
Yeah.
The Fiazaros, I don't know.
All right.
They've basically come out and also said they have intention to visit many other locations as well as in America. They've been open now for having a second race in China. They want to expand that market.
Yep.
They want to return to South Africa. And the question rises, well, saying, well, they're currently on a 23 race calendar. They basically have a contract with the teams to say they won't run more than 24. And most of the teams have said that that's basically their very hard limit. They would need some really big incentives to push past that. So the question becomes, you're bringing all these new races, which is great, but the calendar's starting to look mostly like there's kind of a lot of tracks now that we'd either consider, old classics or newer races we really don't want to suddenly see gone. So a mention of that is one of the races that's come up a fair bit is the French Grand Prix. And part of that, I heard Ocon come out basically saying that he would do everything he can to save it and stop that from happening, which I thought was interesting.
Same with, I think Gasly said the same as well.
Similar comments. Yeah.
So,
and it's big for the drivers. I mean, even when I was on the ground in Australia and what it might do, what it does to a driver to be at home and to see how that energy and to have it as a point to look forward to, knowing that it's not going to be the end of the world, but if you are a driver from a certain country that has a race and that might go, that could be quite, even looking at the German Grand Prix and, Vettel's been quite outspoken to say it sucked to lose that. Both because it was a classic track and,
they got two tracks there,
Yes.
And they
even when they
narrowed
could have cycled between the two and now. Exactly. So, so the question kind of comes, what's going to happen? It's been interesting as well in that Monaco, which essentially had, I forget what they call it, had like a royalty clause or something like that, where they essentially said because this is the crown jewel, it's going to be the last on the chopping block, and they essentially give them a lighter fee to stay on the calendar, but I think going forward they've said that's now exempt. They're on the same contract as every other track. They need to start paying more fees for it, and as well I think their exemption to practice on the Thursday and have the roads open on Friday, they've also said we're not doing that anymore. We're going to stick to the normal schedule.
I think as of this year it's gone to the Friday, Saturday, Sunday it will be. So
yes, I think you're right.
First year they're doing that. So they're basically saying actually no, the pedigree of the Monaco Grand Prix is it's not more important than F1 as a whole now, so we don't need it's either it's either a bluff they know they can win, or it's literally like we're getting so much more money from these other tracks that they obviously lost a lot during the pandemic and they're trying to recoup costs, which they are a business. They're getting so much more money from these tracks getting these 10-year contracts, the 3 races in America, the potentially, the second race in China, all the Middle East races as well. They're getting a lot of money to go to these places. And it's like, well, what is Monaco really giving us? Financially or monetarily. So, maybe it is just actually, we don't technically need you. So, at least from a business standpoint. So, there's obviously a lot more that goes into that, but I think the Monaco Automobile Club president came out and he's basically guaranteed that the Grand Prix will stay past 2022. So whether or not that's actually the case, or he's just like, I will not let it go, or he's just kind of I don't know what it is, but I'm sure we'll find out soon because the contract expires this year. So
exactly, if it's a statement to say, look, we're happy to pay more to have it here, then I guess it's a win-win. Because again, I mean, there's always comments that Monaco could be more exciting, but because it is kind of so unique in that, and the drivers love it, and it is such an achievement to win it, there's nothing to say. Well, if we can stay here and actually it helps out, give all the teams and all the commercial rights holders a bit more money because they're going to pay a bit more, then it's a win-win, right? That's less cause. I mean, not to get too controversial, but if you were to say, if we double the fees that we're hosting for Monaco to get rid of Saudi Arabia, I think most people would be like, yeah, okay, I'm happy to take that. You know what I mean? Rather than having to go, okay, we're going to charge them less, but we've got to race at more oil money states. So, but it is interesting when you look at the Canada. I mean, F1, of course, I guess have been they're obviously open to, from a racing perspective, to changing certain tracks. I mean, we saw that obviously at Abu Dhabi, which has been a lot of criticism, and they were happy to make quite significant changes. I mean, we saw it, as we say, even with Australia. I mean, Australia is moderately safe, but there's still been talks for a while now saying they could either move it or just scrap it entirely. So they've obviously been open to trying to change things. With Spa as well, happy to make those Eau Rouge changes. There was often a case for a long time to change Radeon and Eau Rouge, but it's very tricky because it's essentially just a little straight down a giant hill, and they said it would be a massive amount of work and track closure, and they often race there throughout the year to do that. And obviously they've pushed their hand on it, especially, you know, with some of the unfortunate accidents recently, and they've finally gone, okay, yes, we'll pull our thumb out and make these big changes that you want. So
it's also such an iconic part of the track as well that you don't want to change it so much that it loses its identity. So
yeah, I think the flow itself is relatively similar. It was more having a lot more runoff and a lot more space for safer barriers, because you have cars coming off, and because it's so thin, they get fired back into the firing line, which is scary when there's a blind crest. Get T-boned. We've seen way too many scary incidents there, as we say, resulting in some, you know, not great outcomes.
For sure.
So yeah, but even it's tricky looking at the calendar. I mean, I guess the middleman they can go to is like a cycling calendar where they could almost have like 40, 50 circuits, and they kind of just cycle them every year, 2 year, 3 year kind of deal.
Yeah, that's what I think Vettel and Sainz have both come out and with suggestions of the rotational schedule in the future, which is something that, again, we talked about when they started announcing all of these big contracts races, and all the American races, and you know, going to Saudi long term, and you know, the Qatar one that's coming back next year, and you know, going back to all the ones that have been off the calendar for ages, you know, like Singapore, which has got that contract to 2028, Canada's got a contract to 2029. What else have we got here? Yeah, China's obviously coming back, and that's still got a contract to 2025. They still want a second one there. They're not going to get rid of the Chinese race, especially while Zhou Guanyu's still racing as well. The Suzuka is coming back. They've only got, I think they finished 2024, their contract, but you know, that hasn't been on the calendar for a little while. So, you know, all these tracks coming back because COVID is sort of still around, but it's not quite as rampant as it once was. So it'll be interesting to see what goes. Like, obviously a lot of the tracks like your Portugals and your Turkeys and you know, these ones that were sort of more of a filler while the other tracks couldn't be raced, they probably unlikely to see them come back, but you never know.
If there was unless they form part of that rotation. I mean, I was even surprised. I was even talking to some people about Imola, and they were kind of like, "Oh, is that actually on the calendar now?" They're not, you know, because they were a kind of fill-in circuit. And that was one, I think, which was so good, and it has that history that they went, "Well, we're actually going to stick it here." But again, then you've got, you know, 2 races in Italy, and you start going, "Well, they're going to rotate between Monza and you know, and Imola," and then you start going, "Well, you can't get rid of Monza," but then you go, "Well, then what tracks can you get rid of?" I mean, you know, it's interesting. It's I guess it's a good problem to have, right? When we went from COVID and, you know, seeing that F1 could be struggling a lot, and now they've probably put in this new structure where it's a lot easier for teams to exist, where, as we'll probably get into shortly, you know, engine manufacturers are keen on coming in. There's a lot of tracks that want to come in, which just shows that there's a lot of more interest and everything's a lot more affordable. And, you know, hopefully that means we see less tracks we're going to just for the promoters with empty grandstands and empty seats, and we can more be in places like, you can imagine, you know, even, it was interesting on Twitter when they announced the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and I saw so many people, you know, from even just people from I follow from games that I play, all, you know, saying, "Oh, there's a race in Las Vegas. Do you want to go next year?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's do it." And
cool.
People that had never watched F1 before, that were kind of like, "That would be so cool," you know. And arguably, I could even see something like the Vegas race almost replacing the honor of something like Monaco being, you know, as an iconic track in somewhere amazing.
People have been
in a
suggesting
prestige
that,
location.
actually, because it's because of the glitz and the glamour. Like, that very easily could take the place of that Monaco glitz and glamour. So, at least in terms of the spectacle of it. So, it's gonna be very interesting to see. I think the end of this year will be interesting to see what gets put on the chopping block, because there's definitely at least a couple of tracks that have to go. Whether or not they will actually try and keep it at 23, or whether they'll actually bump it to 24, That will give them at least a little bit of leeway. But yeah, the ones that are out of contract at the end of this year are, as we said, Monaco, Spa, France, and Mexico are the 4. Yeah, it seems like I don't even know. I mean, every time I read, it seems something different, but it seems like France might be the closest one to go. But then if you've got, you know, a couple of drivers are saying but again, you know, then you had Vettel who said Germany and it didn't matter. They got rid of it anyway. You know, they still had a couple of Germans at the time when they got rid of that. So it's not entirely unthought of that they could just get rid of France. In recent years, it has been not the best for racing. But given, you know, I guess it depends on how the race goes this year as well. So they do have 1 year to I think that
produce a cracker.
Produce a cracker, maybe try and really promote it, get the ticket sales up. I'm not sure how much COVID is going to be restricted in France, but just try and promote the heck out of it and try and get maybe the biggest French Grand Prix, kind of like the Australian one did this year. They just had record-breaking sales. So, if you can do something like that and be like, here's our value, then maybe they'd be more interested in trying to keep it on. But I think at least 1, probably 2 of those 4 tracks will go for next year, I think.
We'll certainly talk about it for a long time, as we have been already. I guess we can use this as a segue. We do have, related to this, a viewer question. Did you want to take that?
This is from our friend Sam, aka Crosso Dog. So if you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about, again, because this is a longer form, we can sort of go into a bit of a deeper discussion. So let us know if you're listening on Spotify. Just send them to us at our Twitter at Final Sector YT. We'll try and incorporate it into the next episode. If you're watching or listening on YouTube, just leave them in the comments below, and same deal. But this one's from Sam, and he says, or he asks, at this point with all the circuit changes, I'd love to know what adjustment you'd make to a track to make F1 better there. So examples he gave is like add or take a corner, add runoff areas, etc., etc. So let us know your thoughts. We've had a little bit of a think about it. I don't know if you have more info than I do. I'm still struggling to think of something. But what would you change about a track to make it better?
I guess I think of some tracks that used to have certain things that they changed. The main
Singapore
one that comes
Sling
to mind,
Chicane.
I think.
Let's go, bring it back.
If you haven't seen the Singapore Sling, go on YouTube and search Singapore Sling. You'll see a great official video from F1 where they look back at it and the bloody chaos that was that corner. I think they said it at the Vegas race. There's a set of corners that seems reminiscent of the Singapore Sling as well, I believe.
Oh, really?
So that might be interesting, depending how they render that. But I do think back. I guess my first thought is for Imola heading into the straight. They used to have
the chicane,
a left-right chicane there, which I think actually kind of would work well in these cars. I feel like running off of the back of those 2 corners, they're kind of the type of corners that tend to stretch cars out a bit.
Sure.
And I kind of like that old chicane. I mean, it helps that we had, that the old shot of Hakkinen coming out of the back and slamming into the wall, and that's always memorable for me. But I feel like something like that in this current day. I mean, even if you think about it from it's a similar thing to Spa, I guess, where at the end where they used to go through quite a quick section, but now they've slowed it down a bit, and that seems to work quite well. When Spa had an old version of their in bus stop, right?
Yeah, sure.
So that's probably a change I wouldn't mind reverting. Maybe controversially in Australia, I would probably, a lot of the corners that they changed a minor amount, I would keep. I quite like those.
You want to bring back the right left, don't you?
Yes, I would bring back that straight that goes into that more of a braking zone before you go down across the what do they call it? I forget the name of the road. Lakeview Drive, I think it is, when you go to the side of the lake. I would probably bring that back. I think a lot of drivers were saying too they quite enjoyed that corner. It's quite tricky. Even getting the traction out of there is very hard. We've seen a lot of drivers fly out into that wall.
I think it was like off camber potentially, wasn't it? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it just had a big curb on the inside and it was easy to kind of... Yeah, and in these cars, I think it would present a bit of more of a challenge as well. And even if they just kind of redefined that and made it a bit slower, I think that could have been interesting.
Yeah.
So I might even bring that back. I might have a bit of a think about some others. What have you got so far?
Yeah, I mean, I've literally just got... Again, I mentioned this before as kind of a joke, but in France, I kind of just want to get rid of the eyesore of the runoff area, the blue and white stripes. That's so painful to look at. Just put fucking gravel in there, please.
Well, even just keep the concept of it makes sense in terms of having like a light sandpaper, heavy sandpaper, but just color it differently. Yeah. Why is it colored like that?
Yeah, I don't fucking know. And I mean, the only other thing, I don't know how they would do it, but it's again sort of fantasy world stuff. But like Monaco always has, their qualifying is always one of the best because they have to push the cars so hard and the circuit's so tight. Qualifying seems to be the highlight for Monaco. So I don't know that I'd want to change the track for qualifying. I don't know if it'd even be logistically possible, but like having the qualifying track and then having the race track where maybe things are a little bit more open, making it a little bit easier to race or overtake, or maybe it's just slight changes. I don't know if that...
And I think we mentioned as well as a caveat to say we should add a fantasy as well. If we disregard if there's buildings there or heritage sites or hospitals, like just get rid of it. For the sake of F1.
I fucking hate hospitals. Get rid of it. But yeah, so like that's maybe the biggest one. Again, I don't know how it would logistically be done, but
even just extending maybe like the bottom area so you got a longer back straight than the front straight. And we see cars occasionally dive into before the second to last corner. Extend that a bit, maybe make it wider so you can actually have a bit more of a dive. There's 2 lines through there. That extends the front straight a bit, something like that. It's interesting how I think it's just a problem as well that F1 just... Like, I think part of the appeal for it with the older cars was because it was those cars really were, not to say that driving cars these days is easy, because I think they're easier cars to drive at a low limit, but to drive at the absolute upper limit, you still get brilliant qualifying laps around there, right? But for the race, they're just not that well suited. Well, previous cars, you'd often see a lot of incidents and brushes against the walls and everything because of the trickiness. And even when I think about Formula E there, and that's often a really good track for Formula E because those cars and the different management and everything that affects them, and you've got a car, it's running at 50% power trying to back a train, but that's completely different to the rules of F1. So
they can also...
It's a little tricky for that.
FE can also sort of do a little bit of bumping and barging without too much damage.
It's true, yes.
Whereas F1 just can't, you take a quick look.
It's very much a hard no contact, right?
Front wing with your index finger and it flies off.
Yes.
So, you can't, especially with the cars getting even bigger now, like you just can't run side by side there.
Yes. All you need to do is look at Sainz when he started Leclerc when he started at the back was trying to make up places, and he was throwing it and then dinging a wing and then dinging a tire and just went like, he's got no other choice, but then you just see it's, even with that massive speed differential. I guess thinking I'd apply maybe the same to Hungary. I think if the front straight was a little longer, so cars can just catch up a little more, I think it almost works out well where even though they really only have that first and second corner to overtake on, often you do get a lot of decent fighting there, but I think you just extend that front straight a bit more, and there's a bit more of a run into that second than, leading into the rest of the first sector complex. I reckon that would help a bit. It's hard to change that middle bit, which is really where the cars kind of spread out a bit, but I think that's generally been how Hungary's been anyway, so I wouldn't necessarily change that because that's kind of the heart of the track.
Yeah, sure.
If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you could still maybe change that if you really long extend that first corner. That could help as well.
I think a lot of these tracks have in common is the straights just aren't long enough for the closing speed to get close enough. So
exactly, yeah.
Which again, maybe because these cars can follow a little bit closer, maybe it'll be a little easier, like they can maybe just catch through the corners, and then by the time they get to the straight, they're already right behind them, because they haven't had to back off, and then they can sort of make moves. But again, is the straight going to be long enough to even send it for a move, or do they need a little bit more? Like, I think that's kind of what needs to happen with a lot of these tracks. But again, particularly Monaco, those straights are just not nearly long enough to really do anything unless you have such a good run or just like such a big speed differential with the car in front that or they just have like a really bad exit from the final corner or something. It's just not going to happen. So, anything,
just looking through
anything like that.
Go on.
No, that's it. That's all I was going to say.
I was going to say, still no, just looking through the track list. I don't think we have that many tracks that are really a concern. I mean, we're not going there this year, but even Russia, I've never really minded. I think it has been more of an F1 car problem with the dirty air has really hurt there.
Yeah.
But I know for a fact, playing on the games, that's actually a really fun track where that's less of an issue. And I think it does work if you have cars that just don't suck being in filthy air in mid-speed corners, because the entire track, except for like 2 corners, is mid-speed corners, right? Even Singapore, I don't mind. I think there's enough straights there that makes it interesting, and the cars can follow closely through everything else.
I think they can run side by side as well. So
that's such a great example of a city track that actually works, right? Even though it's plonked in the middle of a city. You could think about changing something with Japan, but that's always kind of worked just enough as well. I think tracks like Mexico is fine, Brazil is fine,
Spain,
Abu Dhabi. Yeah, Spain is the only other choice I was thinking of. I know they made the changes for the MotoGP, but I would change back that corner in the middle of the track that they changed, because I love the fact they had a heavy braking zone there, and it made the next corners after that really tricky. But now where they sweep out, I just feel like it's a freebie, and I hated that they didn't have both layouts there. Since they announced that, I'm like, that's the only fun thing about that track. Even from my side playing it in GT Sport, and that's gone now. So I'm like, just bring it back. I know a lot of people for Spain have said bring back that flat out last 2 corners. You could, but I don't know if it would help everything. I mean, it would maybe help for that final left-right to maybe make it just easier to get a good run out, because it seems so hard to get grip out of there that even if you're in any sort of dirty air, you're stuffed and then you lose your run. I
think even with these cars, again, we read about in testing that they were just like struggling through those low-speed corners because of the a couple of reasons. The lack of downforce, because it's obviously all ground effect. They had to slow down so much. They had no downforce, trying to actually steer, their heavier weights of the tires, trying to get that car turned in was just super hard. They can't go over the curbs as much as they used to because they were down. So I was going to say
there's massive curbs there as well, so you can't even attack it like you used to be able to.
Yeah, so it makes it, if maybe the car behind gets it right, but the car in front, they go a bit too deep because, they can't get it turned in, or they've gone in a bit too fast, or they clip the curb, and they've kind of squirrely out of the corner. Maybe that could set something up for this year. In these years, this year's cars. So, I think there's a little bit more potential with that slow speed, and I think there's that
last sector. I reckon, I don't know how you do it, but I reckon you could change that to make something even dynamically different to how it is now.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't know.
That's about, I think, all I'd have. Looking at the rest, Baku, I think, is fine. Even Silverstone's fine. Austria, fine.
Yeah,
you could for the sake of it, but no, I go to those races being excited, knowing that it's going to be a good race.
Yeah,
exactly. We're used to for some of these where you go, oh brother, just bloody sleep in for this one. Lap 2, going to bed.
Oh boy, yeah. That's usually with Monaco. It's like you see them go through the first corner. There's no red flag, and you're like, all right, good night, everyone. That was fun. So.
And then they cut to Stroll, and you go, "Oh no!
what
did he miss? One thing." We need to know.
But I mean, just something that would improve the overtaking and the side by side racing at any of those tracks for sure. So,
I'll go through a bit of a few quick fire points, which you can choose to pick up if you want, or we can just breeze past them.
Yeah, we can talk about them, and maybe on the next podcast. We're already pretty close to an hour, so
true.
But, we'll touch on some things if you want.
I was just to say one bit more so which was interesting from a headline point of view was Toto Wolff came out basically saying that he puts the chances for Mercedes to win the championship at 2-8. No one knows why he said 2-8 instead of 1-4, but he said 2-8. So
okay, that's what
I know. Yeah, that's what he said, and people were like, weird. Okay, we'll write that down.
All right.
I guess that leads into what we were saying before about obviously they wouldn't have gone down this drastic, different looking car if they didn't think there was some hope there. But they're obviously saying, look, all we're going to rely on is if we do put it together, then it would just be a chance of actually smashing everyone out of the park at the last minute, and then we pull it back.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? On that topic, a little bit of a side note, but I was reading an article. It was actually on the Formula One website. It was one of their Tech Tuesdays that they have. But there's a theory. It's only a theory, but that there's all this talk about the Mercedes engine being sort of like down on power compared to the other three engines. But apparently, like GPS analysis so far from the first three races showed that Mercedes power unit, while it is down, it's only roughly like 0.15 seconds of lap time down on power. And considering Mercedes is like, let's say, a second off per lap to Ferrari and Red Bull, that's a pretty small amount. That's like 10-15% of their lap time to the power unit, which isn't. I mean, it is a lot. 1.5 tenths is
it's
a lot,
noticeable, but it's not like they're off by that amount, or
Yeah, but they seem to. This Tech Tuesday. Who was it? I'm gonna open this article and actually.
There's a few of them that do it.
Yeah,
they're all good, by the way. There's normally like Sam Collins or Craig Scarborough or any of those.
Let me actually
Julian
open it because I wanna.
Yeah.
Open. There you go. Tech Tuesday with Mark Hughes. He's good as well. So,
Mark Hughes, he was the other one.
But yeah, so he seems to think that there's a correlation between the three teams that run Mercedes engines and Mercedes gearboxes, which is obviously Mercedes, Aston Martin, and Williams. They all seem to have this like pretty bad porpoising problem, in the sense that they have to try and like raise the ride height so much that they're just losing so much downforce because of it.
Inconvenience the car.
And McLaren, while they're running the Mercedes power unit, they're not running the Mercedes gearbox, and they don't have the porpoising. So
they run their own suspension system and all that.
So the theory is that and obviously all these three teams are struggling, and if the power unit's only down 0.15 seconds a lap time, according to the analysis, then could it be that how the Mercedes gearbox sort of works in the car, in terms of if you read the article, it's literally called on the Formula One website, why the gearbox layout could be the key to solving the porpoising. It's only obviously correlation and causation are different things, but it's an interesting theory given that we know that all three of those teams are struggling, and we know they're all struggling with porpoising. And downforce in particular. So
I was going to say, we know Mercedes have come out and they said we're just lacking a lot of rear downforce, and this year especially, a lot of that comes from your rear packaging. A lot of that comes from the suspension and how your wind feeds through that, and that suspension configuration is also determined by your gearbox.
Yep.
So certainly something there.
Yeah. So apparently, you look at the overheads, the actual designs of the car themselves. You see this sort of on the Ferraris and the Red Bulls, the sort of like bottleneck where the gearbox sort of sits sort of way further forward than they do on the Mercedes power units. So I think let me see if I can find it. There were two possibilities that he gave. He said the wider bodywork at the rear may be contributing toward the airflow restriction of the underbody. The more teardrop-shaped upper bodyworks of the others should be able to exert a more helpful airflow over the top of the diffuser, potentially making the underbody tunnels more stall resistant. That's one possibility. And then the second one he gives is where the stall point is relative to the car's center of gravity could affect the severity of the bouncing. The short gearbox layout could be putting that center of gravity at a really awkward point relative to the stall point of the underbody and inducing a leverage effect. So that's a lot of fancy words, but basically, there's two suggestions that potentially, it could be that Mercedes engine / gearbox in those three cars that's actually causing porpoising, way more than every other car, and particularly at like lower speeds than someone like, Ferrari. While Ferrari still has the porpoising, it starts at higher speeds and it stops when they get on the brakes, when they actually need to get into the corners, whereas it keeps oscillating in particularly that Mercedes we saw.
Seems to be independent of, there's other factors.
And then, obviously, Aston Martin and Williams, what they've had to do is they've just had to raise the ride height so much that they just to get it. And then, they're losing so much downforce, which is why they're, more towards the back, because they just can't get that lap time that they need to. So
And not just downforce in the traditional sense, where downforce normally in past years equals drag. In this case, your downforce is what sucks your car to the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
It's saying that you have to have less downforce on the straight, pushing it down, but then they also have that less downforce in the corners, so it's both straights and corners less downforce is affecting.
Yes, so double whammy, that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a theory that could, if they can somehow figure out how to get that, that porpoising away using how that gearbox is laid out in the car, or somehow fixing the airflow while not. I don't know the technical things that will go into that, but I'm sure one of those three teams probably has an idea. Whether or not that's even the case, but if it is something like that, all three of those teams could absolutely benefit from even one of those teams having a revelation. So.
And that would also make sense why they've come out and they're kind of saying this isn't just like slap an extra little winglet on it or move a bar here, right? They're almost saying we're just happy they've been open saying that these three races from Mercedes' perspective have been glorified test sessions to get as much data as they can.
Yep.
Probably so then they can go back, figure out what their big upgrade needs to be. They're, probably only one big upgrade they want to do considering costs and everything like that to then fix it and then push it out to the other teams too.
Yep.
So it all kind of lines up, doesn't it? It's a little too coincidental to be just a theory.
Yeah, exactly. So, we'll see. Obviously, nothing's going to happen yet. I don't think anyone's bringing any major updates for a few races still. I think even Ferrari have said that, they're not bringing any big updates for Imola because of the sprint race format. They only get the one practice sessions, so they can't properly trial parts.
Got it, yep.
That was one thing I did read about. So they're not bringing any their first effectively major part for Imola. So you'll probably see that next race. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in the Imola preview, which will be the next video coming out. So stay tuned for that one. But the very last thing is I just wanted to point out that Red Bull seem to think there's still no clear fix for the fuel system problems on that Red Bull. So
problems, because it's not like it's been the same bloody problem. It seems to be multiple, a different problem every time.
So they need to figure out what that fix is and implement it pretty quickly. Otherwise, it's very much just going to be a one-horse race out in front. And then Red Bull could very easily, if Mercedes get their shit together, then they could very easily drop back and have
pretty easily.
and have a second, third fight with Mercedes, and Mercedes could jump them. Yep. So it very easily could just happen like that. So they need to be very vigilant in finding that issue and fixing it fucking ASAP.
Yep.
They can't just...
It's interesting how it could be coincidence, but this is the first year where Red Bull are essentially running their teams under the rebadged Red Bull powertrain, essentially meaning they have their own kind of ex-Honda employees, and they will have some probably still involvement from overseas, but it's nowhere near as close and kind of on-prem as it was. Yep. So there's some saying maybe, when they used to identify something, they had so many hands on deck that they could fix it quickly, but in this case... Maybe because of the restrictions in terms of having to nail things down and in terms of not having all your experts on site to test and go through dynos to solve everything quickly. It's like, is this just a coincidence or is this actually part of that issue that they, were wary of with having this interim kind of band-aid before they figure out their future? So
yeah, well, we'll find out. I'm curious what will happen at this next race, because I think I said in the bloody Australian race breakdown, it's a different track again. Like, fucking who knows what's going to happen. But I'm excited. I'm here for it. So maybe we'll see a bloody flipped script again, and Haas will come back and be the fourth strongest team, and Aston will have found something and they're right in there, and I don't know anymore. Hopefully. I hope it doesn't
We'll probably be seeing a lot of red, I'm sure, on the TV screens.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's true. It's the first actual Ferrari home race with Ferrari at the top, so that Imola might be a sellout. So,
with the amount of red I saw at Melbourne, let's just say I'm expecting to see a lot more at Imola.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I didn't really have any other points. There's a couple of other topics, but we can save them for the next one. They're not super important, so.
I guess one little thing I guess I did just want to mention to close it out without going into too much. As we're saying about these upgrades, I've only read this up because I was looking today seeing some of the Italian media and reports coming out where Ferrari basically saying for their I wouldn't call it final engine upgrade, but one of the last kind of upgrades they can do on their engine is they're kind of like, this is our final little top up on what we're doing. I think they're essentially saying they have what I see referred to as PU2, which is effectively their second kind of version of the current power unit, where they're saying that through something which they've labeled endothermic reinforcement, which I thought was a fancy word, which essentially means it smooths out the kind of delivery and increase of power across the whole of the power curve. They're looking that they might actually have an extra 10 to 15 extra horsepower available once they implement that.
That's fucking ominous.
I think... Yeah, the first words was it might be in case for Imola, but they seem to be patient with it. They might wait until Miami or even after Miami. But the word seems to be that they've kind of found this less through just, having at the top end some extra power, but actually through just smoothing of their curve.
Yeah.
They've got around 10 to 15 extra horsepower they're playing. Of course, we don't know really from the other engines or what they're planning, but it seems to be there's a few sources which seem to be pretty credible saying they've got even some extra boost coming.
That's crazy. I mean, they don't even need to roll it out super quickly either because they've still got the fastest power unit. Mercedes are, again, 0.15 off at best. Red Bull and Alpine both have to, or Red Bull and Renault, I should say, their power units.
Have some reliability to work on.
Yeah, they got reliability to work on. So you can hold that off for a couple of races and run this engine without having to risk reliability issues because they've obviously got a reliable engine. You haven't seen many issues from that Ferrari engine at all, even with the customers. So, they can keep running it. And then maybe, once they feel like they need that extra boost in horsepower.
Or when they're totally comfortable to say we've tested this, we know it's not going to be blowing up. And so I did want to mention that.
Yeah, no, that's good. I didn't read about that, so... Yeah, that's ominous signs for anyone not in a Ferrari powered car, I would say.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so, but yeah, it's a good first podcast. I liked it. Good discussion.
That was good.
I prefer this, I think.
Yeah.
So, hope you all enjoyed. There you go.
Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. I don't remember if we specifically talked about when we would be putting these up, but essentially, unless there's kind of. We're feeling sporadic, kind of, what do you call it? Motivated in the moment kind of thing, a spark in the moment to go, let's record something right now. Generally in the off weekends, so we don't have like a double or a triple header, we're looking to record and upload these, mostly so we've got a bit of time to digest what's happened and look ahead what's going forward. Of course, we'll probably upload a little more in the mid-season break. We're still a while away from that, but our plan would be to record a few things there. But again, that's the format we're looking to have this chat here to fill a bit of the break there.
So the plan in terms of like uploads, like for individual ones, so we're recording this one. This is Saturday. We're going to try and record this Saturdays at some point. Try and get the Spotify one up for Sunday. So if you're listening on Spotify on Sunday, then we got it up on time. If it's up on Monday, then we're shit. Sorry.
And thanks for listening on Spotify as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, if you are on YouTube and you're listening, that'll come out sort of Tuesday, Wednesday-ish midweek. So yeah, Spotify listeners do get it a few days early. So we'll see. I'm gonna see how it goes in terms of editing both of them and see what's realistic. But yeah, at the very least, 2 days early for Spotify listeners. So thanks for listening if you are on there, or thanks for watching on YouTube or listening on YouTube if you're there as well. I'm looking forward to doing these, and I think it's kind of nice that we do it, realistically once every couple of weeks. So enough time for stuff to build up. So.
And it's a bit more of a casual chat about what's going on rather than specifically what's either about to happen or has just happened.
100%, yeah. Also, there's the potential for potentially guests coming on in the future. So
Indeed.
We're having some discussions. So, might see that. If there's anyone you think who might be interested, let us know as well. We'll check them out and we'll see how we go. But
Indeed.
This is fun. I'll let you close it out, Kyle, if you want.
Again, as always, if you guys want to get in touch, if you're watching on YouTube, always chuck it down in the comments. We're checking there. Alternatively, we're always active on our Twitter, so you can either at our Twitter, which is Final Sector YT, I believe.
It's
always checking.
Okay, fair enough.
Not necessarily, let's say, active, but I will keep an eye off things
I've been really bad
there, right?
I've been so bad.
We do generally promote our content on there as well, so if you give us a follow or send us we'll
see the notification.
Respond to any of our tweets. we'll certainly engage on there as well.
For sure.
But otherwise, yeah, look, we've got Imola coming up, so as you say, we'll do a bit of preview for that. There's still a whole series of unknowns and excitement to go for that, so we're very much looking forward to it.
Heck yeah.
And yeah, we'll see you guys next time for the Imola Grand Prix.
Goodbye.
Take care, all.